No, no. Some things are better left unsaid. I have my microphone on, so.
Yeah.
Well, comparing who sent a text when, and then the one from Mike Rollins just came up.
Hello, Al, how are you?
You've gone a long way.
All right, we all set, Jen? All right, welcome, everybody. Nice to see some, familiar faces out there. This is a workshop where the town board will be discussing updates to our planned development district legislation. There are a few things that are available over there on the table. If we ran out, we'll get some more. It's the punch list of items we'll consider, and then a copy of the current planned development district legislation. So grab a handout and follow along. For those of you who may be watching from home, both of these documents are also available on the Town of Malta website. And they're on the link that announces the meeting. So if you're watching from home, the Town of Malta webpage is malta-town.org for now. Everybody ready? So the punch list of items are things that we kind of compiled between staff, and then we got some comments and suggestions from some residents. And so I thought that it would be easy to sit and just go through them based on, basically one by one. First thing we've talked about, and everybody's talked about all along, is the requirement for workforce housing. In our current legislation, the workforce requirement just simply doesn't work. It's based on square footage, and nobody can seem to really come up with a better formula of how we could actually define workforce housing to have it as a requirement in our PDD language. So I think pretty universally, everybody thinks we should just take it out. Am I correct?
Affirmative.
Affirmative? See, this is easy. Board agrees.
That was the first.
Next thing I have on the list here is to have consistency with the comprehensive plan that is actually included in the original, in section B. The last thing says, the proposed development shall conform to the town's comprehensive master plan. I was gonna suggest that maybe we just have stronger language to that effect. I haven't really drafted anything or thought about it, maybe giving that, right now it's in minimum lot sizes, maybe giving that its own little, section on consistency with the comprehensive plan. Anybody have any ideas about how that would?
What are you referring to?
Comprehensive plan.
Right, there's a suggestion that we should say that our PDD language requires that any PDD be consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I think we initially made some recommendations from the comprehensive plan yet that we haven't voted on yet, right?
The comprehensive plan has been adopted.
I got that,
We haven't changed the zoning yet.
but we haven't changed the zoning from recommendations of the comprehensive.
Right.
So I think we should, me personally, let everything settle and the dust settle before we just start, going back and looking at what the consistency of the comprehensive plan where, it contradicts itself all over the place. I just don't want to, so you're not actually proposing something to the comprehensive plan besides just saying it should be, we should conform to it?
Right, well, the language, that's like I say, this was a suggestion also for some residents. The language does say the proposed development shall conform to the town's comprehensive plan. That's in the current PDD legislation. Basically in,
Already, it all depends what the definition of is and what conform is, right? If I'm thinking about it, am I conforming or am I actually building a wall and conforming, so. I said we skip over that and come back, circle
Okay.
back.
Next thing I have on here is construction density. It was suggested that maybe we require a minimum of open space in a project. Kicked this around some with planning staff, and if different, first of all, our PDD language as it exists is different size lots for different things. So commercial, size, I don't know where it is in here, it's right in the beginning, minimum lot size requirements. So, right now, the existing language is that site for a planned development district shall not be less than 10 acres for residential, 3 acres for commercial, and 5 acres for planned industrial development. So, in some cases, that requirement, in residential, that requirement's not so bad. To say that, you know, maybe that 25% of the project has to have a minimum, that the project has to have a minimum of 25% of open space for residential development. Again, that's a minimum lot size of 10 acres. So it's a bigger lot, more opportunity to provide open space,
So you're
But-
saying that it's 25 or higher, right?
or higher, yeah, I mean, it could always be higher. So the minimum.
Is that listed at
But does it-
35% right now? No.
No, right now, it's not addressed at all. That there has to be particular
Well,
open space.
let's just deal with the first sentence. The site for a planned development district shall not be less than 10 acres for a residential development.
Right.
Boom. We ran into this problem with the South Shore, you know, because it was not 10 continuous acres. 8 over here, 2 down the road, and then we got into, we're splitting. So I think we ought to maybe decide, say, continuous, instead of having 3 plots adding up to 10, and then therefore, if you're gonna win in law.
I think it's a good idea to do that.
If you're making that a little bit more specific, I think we just run into less problems down the road. I don't know. That's just my thought. Only because we came across this problem in the past,
South Shore?
where most of it was getting one, and then it was actually 3 locations.
Right, they added another parcel to make
You
the,
would know.
The only thing I would suggest is that when you're going divided by a road, I think it's different than if you're saying 3 acres here and then a half mile down the road, it's another 3 acres.
You said across the road.
Yeah, I'm saying if they're contiguous or they're across the road, what if you have a National Grid, not an easement, but they own an in-feed right through the middle of the property, you wanna make it a PDD? It's not really a road, it's not down the road, what about, I'm just saying, if you're gonna consider that, you should look at some of the particulars when you're drafting that language, because there are scenarios, I think, that it's okay if they're adjacent, but not, I get it, you don't wanna do one.
No, that, you make a great point. I didn't think of it like, you know, close proximity, but if you remember, they were using the road against you,
That's right.
not for you, saying, hey,
No,
it's
I
close
agree,
proximity.
But I think there are situations in which that there can be something that divides parcels, but these still make sense to do.
Yeah,
Or
there-
if you want additional parking for a restaurant right across from the employees, that not be part of the PDD. I think there are particulars that you wanna look at when you're drafting.
And there's
So-
fire
so I-
breaks and stuff.
so
you
I
know.
think you're right, I think we gotta think about the language for that, but make it not necessarily contiguous by joining, but
Close proximity.
close proximity, or
Whatever that
something to
means.
that effect. I don't wanna get too bogged down with the,
Well, you just got a comment, I'd like to.
okay,
If
okay,
National
but
Grid
again, we're not gonna-
easement Through a property, the landowner still owns the entire property, it's still one
Yep.
contiguous.
That was just
Okay.
one example.
yeah, all right, this is a workshop of the board though, so I'm hoping that we can get through it by not making it all
Disregard what I
participation.
said. No, disregard what I said.
At the, you know, if we have time,
I always
if we have
get in
time at
trouble,
the end, we're planning on closing this out at 5:30, then I'll allow some public comment, so, but thank you, Jeff. And you're right, so I think that's just language that we kind of gotta work through,
That's just wordsmith, you know.
yeah. So, so back to the, and then 3 acres for commercial, kind of kicking it around with staff to say that 35% of a 3-acre commercial lot's gonna be open space might be a little more problematic. That it might make more sense to be you know, to differentiate between them as far as the minimum requirement for open space.
All right. I like to go slow. First sentence, 10 acres, residential area, we just gotta maybe think about how we're gonna word that to preclude,
Yep.
you know, the slippery
Right.
slope. 3 acres commercial, you guys got problems with that? Anybody? No.
No,
5 acres for planned industrial development?
no, I think that's fine.
So what are you saying, where are you talking about 25, 35% open space? Is this in this area?
But it would be probably in that area, the minimum size requirements. It would be in that paragraph. Right now, it doesn't. First of all, some of this stuff is broken up weird anyway. I mean, the whole thing needs to have different paragraphs, but,
Jamie, what's on the books right now for required for open space on, say, a 200 apartment development? Is there any?
It just, no.
All right, that's fine, I just trying to get my head around, you know, what are the requirements right now?
Right, well, one of the reasons that it's being discussed in the manner that it is because when you were talking about your bulk requirements tables, staff was making the recommendation that we try to make everything be a minimum of 35% when we were going down through the commercial uses. You've had some suggestions from the residents who have done some work on the PDDs and have met with all of you a couple of times now that talk about 35% being the recommended open space. And so we were just trying to just talk out and see if there was some type of a happy medium. We think there's some merit to including it in there, but we're just not sure that 35% is the right percentage in most cases. So that's why we're 20 is a 25 is a 35, but it'd just be, you know, residential because it's a minimum 10 acres, like, so that's why we're having this little discussion.
You must have been spying on us, but that was the exact, I agree we should have some open space, but is 35 the right number? I don't know.
because that 35% also in the current language does not include undevelopable areas. So if you've got a parcel that has, you know, 10 acres, the 10 acres works. But if 3 of those acres are wetlands that can't be developed on anyway, is that 25, that won't be calculated in that 25%. So, you know,
Are you saying it's not, or it could be, or?
right now, the current
Gotta be-
language says it is not. That any undevelopable, any land in the parcel that's undevelopable is not included in that,
There's open space.
correct? It can't be it can't be part of the calculation for the open space.
Do we know how many undeveloped PDDs we have left in the town?
Undeveloped?
Not started, or,
No, well, 1, I think. Sage is in a PDD, right? The only one I know of is New York Development Group. What?
It's not the whole thing.
excuse me.
I don't know, we'd have to look and see, we didn't really calculate for that, we repealed like 11 of them, you know, since I've been here, extinguished them. Plus some got extinguished when we did the form-based code too, but we had little pieces that we kept. So that, I think we had, what, 51 in our heyday?
You might have to be up here so
41,
people at home can hear you.
You know, 35, we might have 35, but to have them not be started, I don't know.
Okay.
Might have 5 or 6 maybe.
What?
Rush
Maybe
from
5
the
or 6
drive-in?
ish,
Was that a?
No, she says no.
what,
Sage Estates.
you know.
I think you're gonna have to have a microphone. Don't give me dirty look.
Well, we just can't, ready, what's this ignorant question? You got a PDD, and you build on that PDD, right? It's still a PDD forever, ain't it? So something that's gonna get knocked down and rebuilt there at a PDD, it's still a PDD, right?
Yes, except that we do also have the power to extinguish them, which we have done.
So the town's got what, like 51, give or take? Some are obviously not active and vacant, you know, but again, it's gonna be well after we're gone is what we're setting the tone for. If you're knocking down buildings and old, you know, useful life of an apartment complex is gone and putting in the new amenities and stuff, that it's still, you know, covered.
requirements, and you got ones from the 70s that are still in play.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, the hardest part is administering them for staff as the years go on, which we did talk about before. So when you write them, you need to have appendices and things that really show. So there can be old 70s and not, built yet, but as long as we have a good guideline, then we're all right. It's not ideal,
No, listen,
it is what it is.
my memory serves me right. I know there's a whole bunch of stuff from the 20s that we're trying to unsort of who wrote what for what down there by the lake. Remember that?
1927?
1927. Thank you. See, I got
Good
I'm
year.
close. But anyhow,
Does anybody have a feel about that? Do you want to have a minimum requirement for open space in residential PDDs?
I'm going to say yes. And what that number is, I would imagine is Poppy, anywhere from 20, 30%, I bet, in my head.
I mean, basically, I think we would set a minimum.
I
So-
would set
That's
the
what this says, require
25 or
minimum.
higher, even in residential.
But we're really only talking about residential at this point, not commercial necessarily.
You go 35%, that's a third of the property. That's big.
And if you're not including constrained lands in it, it's even bigger.
Yep.
I mean, it makes it, really undevelopable.
And with the new state requirements, that's kind of a
Makes a lot of land undevelopable.
fluctuating.
Yeah.
If that residential neighborhood is buffered or butted up against a commercial, then we have that buffer. Will the buffer act as part of that 35% or the percentage that
Yeah,
we pick?
I mean, we talked, Jimmy and I talked about that earlier in the case of, to take the example of the New York development, they've got the 100-foot buffer between, they're proposing a 100-foot buffer between the apartments and Malta Gardens. That 100-foot buffer would be included in the calculation of open space, undisturbed land,
I'm fine with that.
so. 20%?
Say 25. Did you say 25?
25, I would go for or higher.
It's hard to pick an arbitrary number.
Yeah,
Is this something that we can empower the zoning or the planning board to be able to?
I'd rather set a limit,
I'd rather set it.
and I'd rather set the limit lower, and it's easier to go higher than vice versa. So if we set a limit, say 20% at a minimum, that doesn't mean the planning department and say, hey, we want 35, 40, or the comprehensive plan is planned for 35, but you don't want to stop something because the way the corner of the mountain is and all that stuff. But if you put a minimum, and then we could see if it doesn't work, you could always go up. But if you start high and then give it to someone later on lower, well, then you have the Hatfields and McCoys.
I'm fine with 20. I think 20 is probably a better number than 35, anyway.
What do you say, Jamie?
Or I thought we were settling on 25%.
All right, I'm in for 25.
All right. Going once,
Boy, it changed that quick.
going twice.
You all thought I was going to argue with you guys today.
You never argue, you just comment.
Yeah, that's right.
So the next thing that is in the same sort of vein is the limit the lot coverage or the number of units as a percentage of existing zoning. So what that means is planned development districts by nature are looking for increased density. So do we want to limit the maximum increased density that we're going to allow? I mean, the suggestion, that we got was to say 135% of what the existing zoning is. Is that a fair number? Is it enough?
Why would we increase it from 100%?
Well, because then the purpose of the PDD generally is to increase the density. Most of them, it's to increase density. It's why they want a PDD. Is because.
If it was explained to me right, if I have memory, most PDDs are well over 100% of what their normal capacity was because of, it's a PDD, so you got a plot and you're going up 10 stories and then 400 apartments. I'm exaggerating here.
Right.
So if you got a PDD, now you can, mix and match, and we don't want to exceed 135, right? Percent of what should be built there?
Again, and is that a fair number? I mean, I don't really know.
I don't know. Enough people have looked at it, seems like, that I can't argue against it or for it, so. But I think we should have a number, though. The more specific we are sometimes, the better, and then we can eliminate later, right? If it doesn't work, but at least we get rid of the Wild West.
How do we get rid of it? If we approve, we can go 135%, and then they drop off an application meeting that standard.
Well, first of all, by nature, a planned development district, we can just say no. We don't even have to entertain them. If it's a project that just we don't like,
Well,
doesn't matter what they say,
what this would do is to establish a
maximum,
bar
right?
for them that they have to strive for. Right?
They don't have to strive for it. They can have it be 110%.
When
They just can't
we
have it
say
be,
no.
they just can't have it be 150%. Or whatever number we decide.
I would like to have some kind of a limit in there. That they, as a threshold anyways.
I mean, I guess I don't know what what it would be interesting to know is what other PDDs that we have entertained, what's the percentage above the existing zoning that they've requested?
Would you know that answer, Jamie, or off the top of your head? What's the average?
No, I haven't looked into that.
Let's look into that and see what really, I
The
mean,
only one that I could think of is in front of the hospital there. That housing project that came 4 years ago.
in front of the hospital?
Well, urgent care. Owned by Saratoga Hospital.
And the Wines and the Bowman
Oh.
Joint and the apartments and all the things.
Yeah, that's a whole different, right. Let's go back and try to do some research and see what, because again, we want it to be a fair number for both us and,
Again, I'm happy around the 35 area, but we could look at it.
okay. Anything more on that? Next thing I have on here is mitigation fees, just so you do know, we already, any PDD, any building is subject to the mitigation fees that we already collect. Recreation, open space, traffic, and for the updating of the generic environmental impact statement. Currently, our recreation mitigation fees are $1,683 per unit. And those go up by 2.5% every year. These fees are actually done in our schedule of fees, which we adopt every year. And so we can change them to whatever we want when the time comes to adopt that as part of the budget process. Currently, our open space mitigation fees are $1,342 per acre, which is a little more convoluted calculation. And, of course, we also have the power to be able to change that, so.
So on the mitigation fees now, I know that there's some very strict guidelines as to what and who can tap into those.
Yeah, they can only be used for the purpose that they're collected. And this, our PDD language specifically says for capital use. And as we've talked about before, we don't want to use mitigation fees for recurring expenses. I mean, we don't want to use our recreation mitigation fees to mow the grass, or in no time, we'll have no fees. So it's for basically capital improvements. I mean, the idea of mitigation fees is, say, recreation specifically, we build a big housing development that puts more people wanting to use our parks or a community center or any of that. So they're designed to improve those facilities, to make sure that, we keep up with the pace of our,
Am I reading this right? It says 1,000, you're saying 1,300?
There also is a caveat in there that says that it changes every year. That number's not hard and fast. When this legislation was drafted,
2% per,
2.5%.
2.5%, like all of the fees, chapter 88.
Yep. But again, it doesn't have to be 2.5%. When we come up to adopting the schedule of fees, the chapter 88, during, at the beginning of the year, we can do whatever we want with those
2% is
numbers.
fairly fair, though. I mean,
Yeah,
Why not increase it to the inflation rate?
2.5%, pretty much.
That's
It
always
is.
fluctuating, though.
Yeah.
No change?
Well, the open space of $1,342 per acre is not a lot of money.
It's not.
In most cases, it ends up to be about $500 per housing unit.
For
And who's
open
paying for
space.
this? This would be the
developer.
Developer? We can go higher.
When you say in open space, you're referring to conservation easement, money used for conservation easements?
Open space can be used for any sort of open space
So
stuff
there
that we
isn't
want,
any guidelines on it that.
other
is-
than it has to be used to preserve open space. Again, I think those numbers, rather than changing it from, I think it's better to be consistent between the PDD legislation and the regular development. So it would be something that we would change in the schedule of fees, not necessarily in the PDD legislation.
Right, so-
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. And then it'd be everybody. Doesn't matter if you're a PDD or just, regular building something
but
that
it should
conforms with
be
zoning.
Is it the same in both right now?
Huh?
Is it the same?
It is the same.
I'll leave it alone then.
So I'm not sure that, like I said, that number needs to be addressed in the PDD stuff. It would be addressed in chapter 88.
When money's collected for mitigation fee for recreations, is that going to a separate
Yes,
fund account?
it goes into a recreation reserve.
Very
And that's-
stringent how it can get used.
Okay, and that can only be used for capital projects?
It can only be used for for lack of a better word, yes,
Recreational capital projects or capital
Yes.
projects all over?
recreation capital projects,
Well, that's good then.
yeah.
I don't think we need to
So
change.
we could use it to, put a new playground someplace or build a splash pad, because I want a splash
You
pad.
Lights
can't
in
use
Luther
it
Forest.
to
Lights in Luther Forest.
maintain the parks. For
Can't
example,
use it for,
Dunning Street, we couldn't allocate any of it.
we could to make improvements.
This was to rehab it. Like the tennis courts, some of the drainage there, and we couldn't even touch it, I heard.
I would think that if it was a capital improvement, that, I don't know why we couldn't. The only one we can't use that money for is we can't use it at Saratoga Lake Park, because that park is not identified in the townwide generic environmental impact statement. So until we update the GEIS, we can't use recreation mitigation money down
We
there.
rehabbed Dunning Street Park.
Yeah, I
We
don't,
couldn't access any of those funds. It was all internal and through donations from Jim Tedisco. So I'd be very
yeah, I don't,
careful
yeah.
on that.
That's the comptroller,
yeah.
that's her area.
But there may not have, there may not have been enough money in there at the time.
She wasn't even privy,
No, I know, but comptroller should
She'll
know
know.
the answer to that
Right.
question.
the oversight.
Correct.
That was a big stretch for us. And there were drainage issues and
Well, the
structural
tennis
issues
court needed
down
work.
there. Yeah. That was under Audrey at the time.
There may just not have been the money available in the mitigation
Yeah,
reserve.
it's- I'm sure.
I
I
don't
heard
know,
that.
yeah.
So if somebody develops a 3-acre PDD, the mitigation collected for open space is roughly $4,000.
For open space?
Yeah,
No.
you said it's $1,342 per.
Oh, yeah, I
acre.
don't know. How would that calculation be?
What's the question?
If someone develops a 3-acre PDD, the amount of money that would be
I think it's probably
fine, or
acres.
I thought it all depends
It's
on
probably
it.
acres disturbed, right?
It says by unit.
All right, so even though this isn't a commercial, because you're talking about a commercial PDD, if we're talking 3 acres. When you do a subdivision like Thompson Farms, let's say that's 20 acres.
Yeah.
The way that Wayne does it is he takes the 20 acres, he multiplies it by that value, and he divides it by the number of lots. And that's where you get the $300 or $400, whatever it is. And they pay that during building permit time.
Well, then, am I mixing apples and oranges when I see a statement? Each residential unit is in the amount of $1,000 per unit, not $300-400?
So this is one of the things, like when we calculate PDD fees, which is on Cynthia's list of things that we need to clarify. And we have this back and forth quite often, the way we calculate the fees. We have sheets and things and the way we do it. And there's units involved, and there's square footage involved, and there's acres involved, depending on if it's residential, commercial, and all of that. And so that's one of the things that we're overhauling this legislation that we need to try to make more clear for both the applicant and for staff to calculate. Because even on the most recent one, staff calculated it one way, the applicant said, we think it should be the other way, paid us what way we calculated, but did so in protest. Hasn't actually protested it yet, but you guys get to make the decision over is it A or is it B? And that happens quite often. I mean, I shouldn't say quite often because we don't have a lot of PDDs, but we have these emails going back and forth about discussing how we calculate things based upon if it's condos, if it's a single-family house, apartments, all of that.
So I do think that's something in this PDD that we just need to clarify. We need to make sure that when the applicant reads the language, they understand exactly what they're gonna have to pay.
Kind of like the sales tax issue, right?
Well,
Yeah,
whatever it is, I think the town holds the cards.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so therefore, are we getting enough money for what's going on out there? If not, 1,000 ain't it, and we go to 2,000. If the developer's paying for it, God bless them.
Again, that number will be based on, those numbers are designed in chapter 88, so. And I think you're right. I think we need to,
It
Change some of
should
those.
be adequate to
define
fund
differently.
the open space deed, though. I mean, $3,000 here and there isn't gonna be nearly what we have been spending out on.
Well, yeah, but we can't put an individual developer on the hook for,
No, I'm not
$20,000.
saying that, I mean,
Sure we can.
that would be the last thing I'd want anyways, but, has to be fair.
does planning have a recommendation?
Not at this time, we don't know.
really, when we talked about it, all we talked about is that it's hard to understand and the language needs to be clearer and we don't really have a solution yet.
It is, and I'm gonna have to, one of my sit-down classes with Eugene, and she educates me a lot on,
This is one PDD worksheet that we did for a recent one, and staff checks it, 2 different staff members check it, and we go down through, and so you can see it's like the mixed part versus residential part, this unit base fee, this, that, so and that's just the application fee. So just to get your application in the door, there's a lot of moving parts, depending upon what we're provided, and if it changes, number of units, square footage, or whatever,
That's
And
applied
that fee changes,
afterwards.
yeah.
Huh?
No, that's the application fee.
This is just the application fee, but that's what I'm saying, when you have PDDs, by nature, they have a mix of a lot of different things going on, right? And that's one of the reasons why it's preferred to do it, because the density's more, you have more options. And so, when you're doing that, you gotta parse it out, what you've got, like single-family homes are single-family homes. But apartments, we consider to be commercial, which is another reason why, like we're talking about down by the lake, it was complicated. And
Melissa?
the fee calculations
Door's locked.
complicated, So those are one of the things we need, and we get not in an argument, but we have discussions about units versus square footages of the buildings, so like, we wanna make sure that we're capturing, cause the application fee is supposed to cover staff time, right? And sending
yeah,
it and doing the payment and all those things, and so you know, that's what we have to talk about internally, is it's, you know, you could have square footage of,
Can it be simpler? I mean,
it could be,
I
it
mean,
could be,
it's
but
just-
we have to figure out how to recoup the time. You know, we have to figure out ballpark
Yeah, that formula,
it would be.
that formula ain't gonna get figured out here tonight, but,
No, absolutely not, but these are some of the things that you're not necessarily privy to that goes on
Yeah.
behind the scenes, so when you sit here and say $1,000, $13.34, la la la, you
yeah,
know.
who's paying for it? The developer? I'm
And
feeling,
I think-
I'm not hurting.
I honestly think that that's something that really staff needs to sit down and try to figure out. Because the other part is, I really don't, we need to make sure that we're collecting enough in the application fees to cover what it costs the town of Malta. And really,
But
I,
we wanna be fair
but
too,
we wanna
at
be
the
fair,
same
right.
time, so it's a fine line to walk in some respects.
It's a fine line, but it's also a philosophy. If the town, we're always looking how, ready, and this is an opportunity to get money into the town, you know, and that word taxes ain't raised or anything like that. This is a way to get it. And yes, we're an exclusive area. You're gonna have to pay to come and play.
it
That's
shouldn't be
just-
that complicated.
That's, so I'm always gonna lean towards, if the developer gotta pay more, I'm all for it. If we're here to make some money for the town.
I mean, the idea of the application fee isn't really
And slow the growth of the town.
profit.
You're gonna build, it's gonna, you know,
Is it easier to judge the open space mitigation fees the same way that we judge the recreation mitigation fees, base it on the unit?
I don't know, it's a good question.
Just-
We'd have to do
I'd
the
rather
math both
keep
ways
it
and see how it
simpler
comes
than-
out, right, and see if it's
The application state.
equitable.
Yeah, I think that's something that just internally we should kick around and see if we can come up with a recommendation that seems fair to everybody and bring it back to the board.
I just think the way everything is going up and the contracts, and granted, this money this is not set aside for recreational fees, this is just, these fees go to the town, right? General fund?
No.
No? Are we still on,
Oh, The money that we collect for application fees, yes,
okay, yeah.
but it's supposed to basically,
And it can
the
only be
theory is
used
it
for
offsets the cost of what it takes staff to do.
I know you guys get chapter 88 fees when we do budget season, but I don't know how many people actually look at that table. You should take a peek at that sometime.
Yeah, sure, that's after chapter 87, let me get that one first.
Units and square
Get your-
footages and this, that, the other thing.
Get your magnifying glasses
I don't know
on,
what-
because it's really small print.
What's chapter 88?
It's the schedule of fees
All right.
that we adopted, and I think we amended it twice.
Yeah, this year we had a,
Well, I know we've increased some fees and stuff, I just didn't know it was chapter 88, another synonym
but
for
the
it.
point is, there's all different philosophies about different calculations for, you know, building permits or square footages, areas of disturbance or acreages. So it's not,
Spend
it's
more
kind
time
of,
figuring
yeah.
that out than it would be.
yeah. And we've, you know, over the years, we've surveyed other towns too, to kind of see, you know, where they're at too. And everybody has a completely different way of
Yeah,
doing things
I
for their
didn't-
own purposes, so it's.
So that's on hold yet?
I think for now, I think we gotta get together and
I
try to,
think it's gotta get,
like, I think the recreation fee
Discuss
is
more.
fine.
Yeah.
You know, have it be based on number of units, because that's,
how about your traffic? How's it?
I just want to make one comment left on the mitigation fees. I agree, we need to evaluate what is the best profitable way for the town on assessing the mitigation fees. And I do feel at the end state that there should be more money raised for conservation easement.
or general open space.
Yes.
I agree with that.
You know, I mean, you know, again, we can change
You
that. It
gotta,
doesn't necessarily have to
again,
be changed in the PDD language. It would be changed in the chapter 88 so that every, you know, development would be contributed more, rather than just to keep it consistent. I think that they should be consistent, just for clarity. So, we okay with that, putting that on hold for a little bit?
Yeah.
Till we find the right number or right process. There are some.
Process and number.
There are some procedural changes that in-house we think would help the process. One of them is that that pre-application, so the applicant comes to the town board and they give a presentation. And if we say, all right, well, maybe, we'll see this further, we have two options. We can either say, go away and don't come back, or we can say, okay, maybe this is right for the town. I think that we should require that before the applicant actually makes the application, that we have a workshop. Couple of things,
When
then
you say workshop, are we talking?
sit down at this table
Us?
with,
Pre-application.
pre-application.
workshop, you guys and the applicant.
and the applicant, and of course, they'd be open to the public. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One thing is, we're giving the applicant at least the opportunity to say why they think, it's a good project for Malta. The other thing that I think would be a plus is it gives the information out for the public to really be able to understand what the project is, so that, the public would then have opportunity before the application is actually done, because frankly, applying for a planned development district in the town of Malta is expensive. And so before they spend that money, we could hear from the public about whether or not they think it's the right thing for Malta or not. And it's just one more layer of examination, both for us, for the public, and for the applicant.
How do you envision that working?
That the applicant comes to us with a concept and presents it to town board, and we set a workshop to sit down at the table with, much like what we did with the New York Development Group. We actually, I think, had 3 workshops with them. Because after,
You don't want to just jump right into workshop. You want the applicant to get up there and
Oh,
give
yeah.
a 5-minute presentation. If it's like, whoa, no way,
Yeah.
then we're not going to have no
right,
workshop, right?
exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
I don't want to have a workshop just because the guy has an applicant.
Yeah.
That's far-fetched.
No, we always have that option to say, no, this is not for us.
I think they should all present to the public of what they want to do.
Yeah. Well, then, like I say, it gives everybody a chance to really, look at it with a more, detailed view.
And how would the public know that
Sa-
this is happening?
same
Are we
way
gonna
we-
put signs out or
Same
what?
way we do everything,
It will probably be
We'll have a lady sign out there by then.
probably have a detailed description on our agenda. There you go.
There'll be a detailed description on the description of the workshop
You got it.
to go out.
Can I jump in on that just
Still
for?
gonna come
Yep.
back and
I
say,
have suggested before, and haven't gotten much traction with that many communities, both in this state and other states, when a property is being looked at for something other than it is now, that the community
Rezoning, yeah.
requires a sign to be posted that looks something like a for sale sign saying this property is being considered for X, or a zoning change is proposed, or whatever, and with the date of when a public meeting would be. Many people trying to get all that information as you're driving down Route 9 on an electric sign, or, with newspaper coverage is poor these days. I really see no reason. This is a low-cost, easy thing to do. And so if it's right on the corner of my development, for example, I can't say I never knew about it if there's a sign right there saying, public meeting about this property X time.
I mean, if it's like I say, if it's a zoning change, then I don't think that that's that bad an idea to put a sign up. There are other things, actually, I was gonna talk about this in public notice requirements. I also was someplace, I don't remember where, but they had little campaign-style signs that said that there was gonna be a public workshop about,
Boston does that.
yeah, was that where I saw it, driving through Boston Spa?
There's about now.
Yeah, it announced, so that could be something that we could require that the applicant have, 20 of those and put them in strategic places to say, this property is, potentially gonna be rezoned. Public
Pretty
meeting on-
low-tech, and
yeah.
it shouldn't be very expensive to do that, so.
So, I did get a comment from someone who's watching from home, so it's good to know somebody's watching, somebody that knows about these things, that mitigation fees are actually determined in the townwide GEIS, and we can't just change them in chapter 88, it has to be changed in the townwide GEIS. But as a part of this whole process, once the rezoning's done, or, adopted, the next part of that is to update the townwide GEIS, so, we can do that during that process. So, just an FYI.
On the pre-application workshop, I agree with that. Is there a pre-application, outside of PDDs, is there a pre-application process for an applicant who wants to, say, develops a commercial area right now?
Yes.
How long is that process?
How long is it?
Yeah.
I mean, they
come
call
for a
and talk to
conceptual,
us.
and then they
We,
go to planning.
yeah, they put something on paper and they come sit with planning staff and we take a look at how, it complies with the zoning of wherever they're wanting to do something, and we kind of talk about some general things, fire and traffic, and then they kind of go back and do some of their homework and things before they actually make application. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 meetings, depending upon what it is, where it is, if anything changes, and sometimes that can go on for, a little while. Like, they could come in and then they could come back in 6-9 months and have something else they want to talk about or do to market or whatever. But yes, we do have that where we meet with
And
them.
then, right, well, staff meets with them, and then,
Yes.
then they have a conceptual presentation to the planning board, where the planning board looks at it, right?
And that's before they submit the formal application.
Yes.
Do we have any type of sunset clause if a developer hasn't proceeded with a project?
I think we do. They can get extensions, right?
Well, it depends on what part of the process you're talking. When they have conceptual plans and they come sit with us, 9 times out of 10, they haven't paid us anything yet. It's staff and what we do to work with people to get a good project to come before the planning board. So it's kind of vetted out somewhat, so that it becomes smooth. Sometimes they need variances and things, and, we go conceptually to the planning board, then we'll go to the ZBA, and then they'll come back. It depends. I mean, there's statutory timeframes when you get approvals. There isn't necessarily timeframes if they put an application in and they only get to a certain point. We have some that go on for a few years, but we reach out to them because when they get to that point, we're holding money in escrow 9 times out of 10 for engineering and legal. And so we're maintaining that account. And after a period of time goes by, maybe 2-3 years, if we don't have anything going, we'll write them an email and say, hey, we've got an account open for you. What's your thoughts about proceeding? That kind of stuff. And then if they say that they don't want to, then we ask them to write us a formal letter and we close their account. But, All Town Fresh is a redevelopment piece on Old Post and Route 9. That came in a few years ago. I want to say it was even before COVID, and they were talking to us, and they got to a certain point, and then everything shifted, and then they come and talk to us recently. So, things sometimes take time. So we don't really have necessarily a sunset clause in that kind of.
You know what, that's just pre-info. They haven't paid any funds at all.
Oh yeah, they have. They did under the All Town Fresh piece. They've gotten engineering letters. They got traffic calculations. They had fees done and everything. But again, it got to that. In that case, because there's no water up there for fire flow, they need to install holding tanks. And so they also got hit with mitigation fees traffic-wise because of where Old Post Route 9 is and the North Line. There was a roundabout, right, slated for over there. And so we, as planners, said maybe we need to look at how this is calculated, because that was, I want to say, like $280,000 for their traffic, and their tanks at the time were like $250,000. So it was a lot just because of where it was positioned, not necessarily because of the traffic they were going to generate. So that time we were collecting at 100% for building that roundabout. So we came back to you guys, and with CRTC's help, and we changed that mathematical equation because we assume that we're going to be getting funding from state and county and other avenues. And this way, we would collect. So I think the fee came down to like $80,000 for traffic. And of course the holding tanks were still what they were. And then I think COVID happened and it just kind of, but they're talking to us again, but they have paid fees. They do have an application, we didn't.
So they got skin in the game then.
Right, exactly. And that's what they were calling to talk to us about. you know, to make sure too that they would be okay with the
That stage
moratorium.
of it, I don't think we should give them a timeline. I mean, it has to do with engineering, the cost of living.
It's just, it's
And
project
sometimes it's-
management
right.
on staff side, right? Floria has a board in her office that has the nitty gritty on all the projects and dates and all the things to try and keep an eye, you know, and if, we'll reach out every so often, but things take time. The outside approvals, especially past COVID, have been, you know,
And
it takes a
financing and-
really big time, amount of time to get approvals, DOH, infrastructure, and so these projects, you know, they can take 3 or 4 years
and some-
before they're ready to have
Yeah.
anything even signed, so
And
it's
sometimes
not
it's-
uncommon.
Sometimes it's beyond the
Oh, yeah.
control of the developer. I mean, water is a problem sometimes.
Form-based code projects tend to go faster, again, that's staff heavy,
And that was
but-
the intent of it.
right,
So
correct.
it worked.
We still have
Something
outside
worked in
agencies
the
that they have to approve, that's right, form-based code does work, yes.
Have we had any applicants go through the process and just sit on it and not do anything with it? Maybe they have the hopes of selling that project off.
About Sage.
Well, now that was a situation
Again, right.
where they sold that development to someone and then he got caught up in a Ponzi scheme. Not the person who bought it, but his money got tied up with a person. And so
It's
there
too
are
common in this
extenuating circumstances that happen where it appears to a person driving down Route 9 that that project's being sat on, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of things going on. It's just like Stein, you know, on East Line. I know, you know, that's complicated, but the water was complicated, but he's been working to get New York State approval and water approval. And so there's this, it's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that no one really necessarily knows.
So if we try to put a limit on some of these projects, seem to get drawn out forever and ever and ever. In other words, a hard line, you wouldn't favor that, right?
No.
Well, first of all, they've paid money to us, so it's kind of not
Well,
in good faith.
You'd
to-
have to be, yeah. But it would also give them the upfront notice that, you know, our intent is to complete it within, say, 5 years.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be a drop dead deadline, but they should be informed. We like to have these constructed within a certain time frame.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really,
Because otherwise, they keep coming back, they got the permits and everything, but they haven't acted on it, and they keep getting these extensions, right?
How long has Global had their site plan approval?
so July of 22. So that's 3,
Sounds about right.
right.
And they're gonna need an extension.
Right. Well, I mean, so you've got extenuating circumstances too, right? We have the two spots in State Farm where they keep coming back, where there's offices that have been approved, but they aren't built, COVID. I mean, it's kind of, you know, but they've got money invested and they've got approvals in place and they're still trying to, and all it is a $75 fee, a letter, dear planner, can I please get on an agenda to get an extension? And then we bring it to the plant. So it's not a lot of work on either side, so to say. But I don't think anyone's dragging their feet on purpose. You know,
That's
I
what
think
I
it
was
just
concerned
over
about.
time things just kind of happen. And now with the wetlands and all of that, you know, there's
That's
always
gonna
little
be huge.
pieces of the puzzle that get kind of changed,
Okay.
and they have to try to
Convinced
regroup. So I don't think you have to worry about as a whole people dragging their feet. I think they genuinely want to do projects. It just takes time. That's all.
If I could just comment on that issue. So one thing for the board would be to remember that when you approve this, you're approving a zoning change, right? You're creating a new district. So just when you create a new zoning, you're saying that this is compliant as long as you build it with the requirements that we put in there. After it's done, if enough time went by that nothing happens, it's a legislative action, you can, just like now, we're talking about amending our planning, you can amend or change it. You could put a sunset provision in there, but I think it gets very difficult to manage because of the complexity of a whole rezoning. But you're not without power as a town board to address your zoning. When you adopt the PDD, you are saying we're replacing the current zoning for that area with new zoning.
Yeah.
So you're making a legislative decision that this is appropriate for that area, and it shouldn't just be appropriate for 6 months or 18 months. You know, it's a long-term, some of
Okay.
these things could have 4 phases that are gonna take 10 years to build
That's
out,
true.
Or more.
so, or more, so. That like global or something like that,
The hospital,
yeah.
I
So I
mean,
just,
that
you
PDD's,
know, just keeping in mind what the range of a PDD can be.
Right.
It could be something minor or something very large, but it's really a zoning change, so that's the decision that you're making.
because the hospital PDD's got to be 15 years old, at least. I mean, I'm kind of guessing.
Yeah.
But then, and they're not fully built out.
No.
They still have other phases, so,
You convinced me.
there you go. Another thing we talked about is, what happens if the planning board gives an unfavorable review? I mean, in my opinion, and if it's up to me, if the planning board comes back with an unfavorable review, I don't think the town board, especially a unanimous unfavorable review, I don't think the town board should continue to entertain it. You know, I mean, maybe we can have a little caveat if it's something, I mean, it was suggested that it be a unanimous. Right now, if the planning board gives an unfavorable review, it has to be a supermajority. So it has to be 4 out of the 5 town board members. But again, in my opinion, if the planning board,
I like the way it is.
just leave it at the supermajority?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
okay
would
with
go
that
for
too,
the
but,
Supermajority.
Gotta have checks and balances, you just can't, I ain't giving free ride.
yeah.
When I get elected, got no say, right?
Yeah,
You know
So
what?
we're gonna
Yeah.
at least supermajority.
that's fine with me, so. The other thing that we've talked about internally is, it's kind of a tight timeline for us to say that if the town board refers it to the planning board, that the planning board has to then, come right back at us in 30 days. So we kind of thought that maybe they should have a longer time. Because one thing is, if you get a complicated PDD and you got a planning board schedule where they've got, 5 things on their agenda, then I don't think they will give the PDD the due diligence that it really needs to really examine it. So I think they should have some flexibility about where they're gonna put it on their
What's the time in
agenda.
Spring right now?
It's 30 days, isn't it?
30 days.
That's not good.
60,
Right.
60 would be better?
Yeah, well, so
Talked
I
about
had-
90 even.
Well, yeah.
I-
We're given a period of 30 to 90. And we say that because, like Supervisor's talking about, agendas, if we
Well, I agree,
already
yeah, we got
have,
meetings and people are gone and.
well, and if you have 5 applications already on the planning board agenda,
Yeah.
now town board is agreeable to this and we've got to slide it in. It's not that it can't be done, but it just kind of puts a little bit of pressure on staff that maybe isn't necessary if we have a little bit more of a timeline, that's
Right,
all.
and
And
I
then we
would be
gotta
afraid,
refer it to the county, and there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, so. If we just had we won't sit on it, so to say, and drag it out, but at the same time, we need a little flexibility to get it on a planning board agenda, especially if ours is already full.
I would like the planning board to discuss a PDD over the course of at least 2 meetings before they have to vote.
well, if they think they need to, yeah.
As of right now, PDD goes in front of the planning board and they're voting on it about 20 minutes later, am I correct?
Well,
I mean, I guess it's happened like that, I'm sure, because it's a positive, a negative.
So if we mandate that the planning board has to, not so much a timeline, 30, 60, or 90 days, but say, you have to discuss this over, or review it over a course of 2 planning board meetings, that allows the planning board members, the first meeting, they see it, they may raise questions, they're not forced to have to vote on it, and they can come back to that next meeting with questions or ideas.
Well, I mean, generally, the planning board itself kind of makes a determination whether they have enough information to do any type of a vote at the time. I don't know if you would really want to get in the practice of mandating that they have 2 meetings on anything. I mean, they might need 4, we don't know, right?
Yeah.
Kind of have to see.
but we need to give them the flexibility to make that
Yeah, well, they're
decision.
their own board with
Right.
their own legal counsel. They need
Right.
to be able to decide what they have. I know where you're coming from. I understand. and especially when you have new board members and maybe they don't understand all the facets of
Yeah.
what you're doing. But of course, there's the side too where they're making a positive recommendation, a negative recommendation, or maybe a positive recommendation with comments to you guys, and then they still have another bite of the apple down the road for site plan review and those things too, so.
I'm just remembering when the South Shore Marina came in front of the planning board, and 20 minutes later, we had to make a decision on approval recommendations, or non-approval.
Well, I
And-
think by allowing them to have more than 30 days to return some type of recommendation to the town board, I think that you would find that would already kind of happen if necessary, right? They wouldn't feel so pressured to go through and do a 20-minute thing. They would say, we want A, B, C, and D, we'll put it on for next month. So that's the other side to that extended period of time. That's how I see it anyways.
It gives the
We
planning
would
board the
envision it
discretion,
to have-
yeah.
Right, if they feel like they need to, else they're up against this time frame, you know, and they probably feel like maybe they need to do something.
The applicant, he might want to change things up also and come back to them. As was done on, with us anyways. With
Right,
the
that was with us.
Planning board, the suggestions are put forward and then they,
And the planning board's
possibly
reviewing
come
whatever
back.
the town board is asking them to look at. So whatever you guys are accept and decide is ready for the planning board to take a look at, that's what they're gonna look at.
Anybody object to giving the planning board more time? It sounds like we're all okay with
I
giving
think it's
them
a
a
good
longer.
idea.
Yes,
It's like no less than 30, no more than 90, I
Right.
think was kind of what
Right.
as a range,
we were
yeah.
batting around.
Yeah, we took that from Lancaster or something. So we kind of talked about the public notice requirements that, you know, maybe some sort of, you know, more, you know, more specific public notice that we have to give, which I think that's just language. And then last I have on here, the elephant in the room, the public benefit. I'm gonna suggest, I think Jamie, Floria, or somebody gave me,
Gloria.
Gloria, something from New York State Town Law, Section 261-B, which I think is good language. I also would like to add some language that we got from our friends to add, you know, the words substantial and permanent, because I think that's where we kind of, yeah, of course,
What's
well, permanent's one
substantial
thing. Right, permanent's one thing, substantial's another. So this is the language, let me just read the language from
And it's got to
the
benefit all.
New York State Town Law, that where they define community benefits or amenities, shall mean open space, housing for persons of low or moderate income, parks, elder care, daycare, or other specific physical, social, or cultural amenities, or lieu and cash thereof, of benefit to the residents of the community authorized by the town board. Right now in our language, yeah, well, right now in our language, it's kind of ambiguous about who actually gets to decide what it doesn't specifically say that the town board decides the community benefit. Almost when you read it, sounds more like
Should be
the
town
planning board,
No, it should
right,
be the town board.
has some discretion in it.
Because the
But-
town board are the only ones that are totally aware of the finances and needs of the town
Well,
as a
it's
whole.
not just that, it's our responsibility, I think, as you know, elected officials to,
It's our number one.
yeah.
I think they're asking for a
What have you got?
clearer definition as to what is a town benefit.
I'm
That's
sure you do.
what I'm looking for.
That's New York State Town Law. So it's just this paragraph has the,
And at this time, my number one thing is the funding of the courthouse. And I made that very clear.
well, we're not,
It's got, what?
we're not likely to get enough projects
that's
to
it,
get $6
quid pro
million.
quo, that's what that's
Well, we
called.
gotta start thinking about that though. And if we don't start thinking about it, it'll never happen, and that's why we're here now.
The grants committee's talked a bit about some
Well,
stuff,
it's a
so,
lot more than just
Yeah.
grants.
anyway, I think Al has something to say.
Of course, listen, public benefit, all right? So the equation goes like this. Developer wants to develop, we say yes, and then there's a public benefit tied to it, right?
we can tie it to public benefit.
And just me, just spitballing, thinking out loud, for me, I would always have the public benefit default be cash. They know they gotta pay up front. What that number is, I don't know. If they want to present an alternative, I'll listen to it. But that's how I'm thinking, when it comes to public benefit versus permanent. Well, nothing's ever really permanent, but, so when it comes to public benefit, yes, I think we should have a cash incentive. Therefore, we could use it, and I would like it to go to, I don't know, you want to go capital funds or the general fund, but, again, I think that's something that's advantageous to our community and our location that we have control over, and if they don't like it, see you later.
I like,
And then we don't have to build as much. I did, ready, those are multiple rules, well,
I agree with you, Al. I like a monetary public benefit, but I believe that money needs to be earmarked for something specific for the public benefit, and that public benefit has to be significant.
it can be earmarked, but it doesn't have to be tied to geographically at that location. It could be earmarked for something we got 4 miles down the road, I don't care, right? Or does it have to be, so you're not gonna have a public benefit if you just put up 200 apartments here and there's no, and then there's nothing else there. What's the public benefit?
And public benefit,
Steve, do you have any, can you weigh in on any suggestions about that, how to describe public benefit? I mean, I too would like to not see the money, I don't know, go to pay the electric bill or something.
No, can't be.
How could that be?
Well, I think the clarity that was suggested about defining what the substantial benefit is, that if we're going to include a cash in lieu provision, that we define it. You have, you know, the problem is when you define what the benefits are, before you know what the project is, it may not necessarily encompass everything. So this is a legislative action. You know, my recommendation would be to address the things that you're wanting to include, but have a catch-all, because there could be some benefit that we weren't aware of. Think of something crazy, you know, they'll drill under the highway so we can get water to the other side of the highway. Well, that wasn't listed in our PDD benefit, and that would be a great benefit, and it's millions of dollars. Not saying that's gonna happen, but
That's why it
when we
should be.
try to include all these things, we need to be mindful that it's a legislative action, that the board should have the discretion to determine what that benefit is.
Well,
I think it has to be broad enough because of the fact that, like, what I said before is, what I think is a community benefit might not be what a young family with 2 little kids thinks is a community benefit. I mean, they might think daycare is a better benefit than, you know, me wanting open space. I don't think that we today can define what in 10 years the community is gonna think is a community benefit. So I wouldn't wanna be too
I guess
limiting.
that's why I'd be interested before, if we could have a vote on this, I'd like to see some sample language about how that would be.
If it was a financial benefit that went into a pool that was delegated by the town.
for a specific
for
thing we want,
specific things
right.
that at the time, it was a want, or
Yeah.
it should be a need versus a want when it
Yeah.
comes to that. Well, we hit all
It
the
also,
other things,
Yeah.
recreation over, open space, traffic, I mean, and the town as a whole would benefit because it saves in taxes. That's how I see it.
we also have to be careful, because the one time we did take cash as a community benefit, it didn't work out that good.
Well, we just gotta be better organized, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, conceptually, again, I'm just talking conceptually, you know, what's the town benefit? I don't know. If 51% of the people walk by and gonna go, ooh, that's good, that's a town benefit to me, as opposed to paying the electric bill, you know, and having that money translate into, I don't know, I don't wanna put constraints on it, but I would like it to be somewhat physical. Either you see it, you don't see it, or you're gonna bump into it.
Right.
Or it's gonna save you from bumping into something else. and 51% of the people that walk by and say, that's a public benefit we got, and they're gonna go, oh yeah, that's pretty good. That's kind of what I'm looking at for public benefit. And
I
the mo-
agree. I
And the
think-
more the money, the better.
I think it has to be, substantial. I
You know
mean,
what I'm saying?
obviously Matt's, lights on the soccer field. Could be that sort of thing.
And it's not gonna be, you can't please everybody that it's, like it says, everyone falls into the category. I agree, it's a public benefit, but 51% is, you know what I'm saying? It's logically, it's.
Unused gazebos are my concern. We
know-
have enough unused gazebos as public benefits.
I agree with you. Or,
Was that the
I
public?
agree with
benefit?
you,
Wait a
Bob.
or a
minute.
section of sidewalk,
Okay.
I don't
Which
get
one do you
it.
wanna knock down first?
Anyway, I would like some flexibility, but also some guidelines to pass along to who comes after us.
The public benefit shouldn't constrain us, the board, of the gifts that we would like to present to the town. That's how I look at it,
Right.
all right? You say I can only go to the dollar store, that's no good, right? You wanna go to the mall for the town.
But we don't want them all in town.
No, I'm saying to go shopping at the public
Okay.
benefit versus the dollar store.
Only Al can come up
So,
with these analogies.
I like my analogies, it helps me think it out.
So is this gonna be talked about as a group of us, or?
No, well, we're
Let's-
talking about it now, I thought.
Well,
So,
We should probably see some practice language before we make any
Yeah.
decisions here or anything like that. Barbara's right, we need to see something
Yeah.
kind of in writing.
is there anything else
Yeah, well-
specific in the PDD language anything else not on my list that you want to address?
I'll wait till the end.
This is pretty close to the end.
we
All right, then I'll go
Is there
right,
something else?
I'll go right now,
Okay.
because I got bad memory. I wrote some things down and I'll
He's
give you.
got- I know he's got stuff to say because he's got boxes.
I'm just gonna try to confirm or deny and back brief what I thought I heard tonight. All right? Going off your agenda, eliminate the requirement of workforce housing. I heard we were affirmative, and that's gone.
Yes.
Consistency with the comprehensive plan, we kind of talked about now putting the cart in front of the horse and let this thing settle before we actually abide by, which we are abiding by the consistency of the comprehensive plan, right? That's kind of moot, right?
Are we consistent on the 25% open space?
Don't
We get,
He's got to check his boxes.
we're getting there. Required minimum open space, we came up with a minimum of 25 for right now. And then the next one, limit the coverage of the number of units, limitations, percentage of existing zoning. We're kind of like floating around, hovering around 135 unless someone really opposes or objects that, right? All
I
right.
think 135 is reasonable.
Well, we were gonna do a little homework on it.
Well, yeah, that's,
Let that
that's
Right,
not
let that fester.
firm. I got possible, 135. Mitigation fees, open space. I can't read my handwriting, so I'm gonna skip that.
We're gonna increase mitigation fees for open space, but we just haven't figured out what that number is and what the methodology is to
Yeah, the
determine it.
process of doing it, right. Like I say, I think it probably has to be done during the townwide GEIS.
We all agreed that some kind of presentation needs to be up there to us and the town board before we give a nod to go forward with a workshop, which should be kind of like sequential and no problem, right? But getting up there and speaking, truth to the word of the public, what you're gonna build is, needs to be happening. What happens if the planning board gives an unfavorable review? I think we sticking with the supermajority, 4-5. Lengthening the time for the planning board to consider. If it's 30 to 90, then just make the stopgap the 90 then, right? You don't need the 30 if you could do it earlier, right?
We need more, we can get
No
more.
less than 30, no more than 90, there you go. Public notice requirements needs to be talked about, but I like Barbara's idea of posting something on the actual property,
On the property.
on the property. And then public benefit, again, we gotta talk about it. I like cash default, and the more the merrier.
I like the cash too.
I mean, if a guy says he wants to present something else that's different, my Ferris wheel, you know, I might vote for that instead of the cash. But other than that, I'm gonna stick to the cash. That's all I got. Did I get it all right?
You got it all right. You were listening.
Can we define the substantial if it was, if it
I
was
take bad notes. You want my notes?
financial, is it hinged on acreage, is it hinged on units? What could be the suggested ideas? Or?
I mean, you
I
guys
think-
talk, it
Thrown
depends
out
on
there.
what they're bringing to the table, I
Right.
believe. I mean, at South Shore, they were talking about a per door. A dollar amount that you all seem to be okay with generally at the time.
Some guy could decide to make a public swimming pool. That'd be different from cash, right?
Right.
It's a consideration.
Senior center.
I just want, I want to clarify the question. Does the planning board have a right to determine or to agree or disagree with what the town board has agreed to as the public benefit?
No. No.
Well, that's ultimately your guys'
Yeah.
Yeah,
as a part of the
Could
law.
be
that
us.
gets
It's
Like
adopted.
I, like I
Right.
say, in the current language.
Ask the
I'm
planning
referring
board
to
for
South
their
Shore.
recommendation or
Right.
something like that, certainly. And I don't think that, you know, if they had a strong recommendation or a strong opinion as a board of volunteers, that Leah would necessarily deter them from sharing it with you, because it might help or have you guys think about something in a different light than maybe you did, because generally that's what the recommendations are meant to do for you all, is to
You know what
try
I'm
to help
referring-
you think maybe something you didn't think about.
Right, I'm agreeing with that answer. I'm just going back to when a PDD went in front of the planning board. And one of the reasons why it was turned down was because they didn't agree with the public benefit.
I think that was some of it, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was statements made that we were getting paid off and everything else was unheard of. You know, and that really frost me.
So do we need to reinforce that when a PDD, if approved, initially approved by the town board, goes in front of the planning board, that the planning board cannot consider what the public benefit is
They shouldn't
for approval? I'm just asking, should we reinforce that? Should we? Is it-
I don't really want to take
I don't
that
think
necessarily
it should
away
be.
from them, you know?
So you
I
want?
mean, it still
the
doesn't
planning
mean, I
board
want the
to-
planning board to be able to remark on the public benefit also. It doesn't mean, first of all, it doesn't mean that they'll necessarily give it a unanimous, they might just say, we think there could be a better community benefit, but that should not overall
That shouldn't hold up the
make
process.
them, right, make them not,
That shouldn't
give a
be influenced
recommendation,
in the
right.
project that they're approving or denying.
right.
I agree with you, Craig.
But again, like I say, they can make a recommendation, but they can still, but they didn't make a negative recommendation, a unanimous negative recommendation solely because of the fact they didn't like the public benefit. There were a whole slew of reasons why they didn't like that project. And
And they did it all
and
in
if
20
they
minutes?
liked everything else, but not the community benefit, they could say, okay, we like all this, but maybe you could have a better community benefit. Doesn't mean we have to take their advice ever.
Exactly.
It's our decision ultimately whether or not the project moves forward. So,
Is there anything in state law or code that prevents the town and the town planning board from meeting and discussing what might be appealing? public
yes,
benefits? Can't do
we,
that?
well, I don't know about public benefit when it's not, but
We've had public discussions.
right,
It would have to be.
With
About
them-
pu-
Yeah.
With them?
Yeah.
I mean, we,
It's
We,
3 or more.
do this, do that, add this, add that tree, apple tree here. We had we were dancing all over the place for
I
a
mean,
while.
with the one we have, they gave it a positive recommendation, but they had 17, 18 recommendations to the town board of things that they thought that we should require. So. Well, we'll try to work up a couple of different kinds of language stuff. See what we come up with.
I would just like to go over some of the recommendations that I've already mentioned before, dealing with the other zoning areas in the town. Just to restate what my recommendations,
You're not talking about PDDs now?
Nope.
Okay.
It's outside of that.
Yep. Anything dealing with zoning in the town. I'd like to remove the residential clauses from the C7 and C8 commercial zones, like 100-foot buffer just reinstate like 100-foot buffer on 7 acres or more between residential and commercial developments with, that being a quote-unquote green belt. Public benefits, we've talked about extensively here. I am concerned about form-based code. I am concerned, I know the road standards are different in form-based code than the rest of the town. Am I correct, Jamie? Do we receive any type of mitigation fees to help purchase any type of highway equipment needed to deal with those?
No,
You can't. It's locked.
no.
You can't switch the pot that it's assigned to something
Right,
else.
we don't,
Traffic mitigation deals specifically with mitigating traffic roundabouts, you know, studying if there's a slip lane needed, that kind of thing. Doesn't have anything to do with what Roger might need to remove snow for form-based
no,
code.
that's stuff that we just need to appropriate in our budget. And, you know, we
Our
do.
business.
Do we want to look at form-based code?
Why do you want to change it?
Yeah, what specifically is it that you?
Do you
are
like
unhappy
what
with?
do we like what downtown Malta looks like?
Yeah, it's,
It was done by the past boards.
it's coming together. I mean, it's still a work in progress, but it's
It's-
coming together.
It's successfully doing, as we talked about, it's one of the few things in town that is working the way it was planned. The only problem that I have in the form-based code is the density of some of these projects
Okay,
that are in it.
okay,
But you didn't specify that, though. This is mine.
Yeah,
okay, let's talk about it then.
But if you want to rip something apart that the town spent thousands and thousands of dollars on, it's working, you have to be specific. What do you want to change in it?
I'm asking, do we want to look at form-based code? One of the things you brought up is that you're concerned about the density. Then let's talk about the density in the form-based code.
This is about PDDs, isn't it now?
well, he wanted to move on, right, for a little
Is there
bit.
anything else you want to talk about with PDDs?
It's done.
They're honestly, left in the form-based code, there aren't a whole lot of places. I mean, I think we're talking about density, you're talking about apartments,
Oh, yeah.
not anything else. It's
Yeah, I
all
mean,
about
I'm-
the apartments.
Look at the one that I was just told about at the Saratoga outlets, and we can't stop it now. It's how many apartments?
I don't know what it came in at like 7:15, right? I don't know what they've resubmitted at,
I
six,
think a little bit, yeah, 7:15.
7:15 still. I know they've rearranged a little bit. Yeah.
What's the number? I'm sorry.
715.
One project in town.
But-
There have been other projects. Is this getting back to what Matt was saying? Is this what we want our town to look like?
One thing is, there really aren't any, I think that the places where apartments are allowed and allowed use are pretty much done
Taken
for,
up
aren't
already.
they? I mean,
I
we
think
can allow
so.
apartments otherwise, but the vehicle would have to be the PDD, and again, that's the discretion of the town board. I think otherwise,
And I think when they
am I wrong?
created the form-based code, I don't think they ever expected to ever have all those
Well, I
apartments
mean, that
to
zone's,
actually happen.
well, you never know. I mean, that zone's been the zone. No one's gonna say that they're gonna build 700 tomorrow either. It could be phased out over multiple years, and so.
Very
But when you think about
Could be 10
downtown,
years.
that's where you
we
want to
can't change it.
have
Yeah.
your density, and that's why that is allowed down there, because then we're gonna have the ability to walk, and, you know, there's sidewalks, and that's what we keep working on, right, and paths, and someday we'll be able to have some transportation, public transportation, so that people can
If-
move back and forth
if
with the
the
density. We
numbers
have to
are
have the people in order.
And that
in
would
order to do
support
some of those
Right.
things.
businesses coming into that area too.
Right,
I get it.
right.
Understand that. It's a lot of apartments.
Yeah.
And people are transient and they stay there 2 years and they leave. That's what I was told the average is. That's not a
Some
lot
of them live
time.
there though and actually buy houses in Malta. I know several people that have done that.
Some of them
lived in an
do,
apartment for a
and
couple of years and they bought a
that's
house.
one of the good things
Yep.
about some of the projects we have on the table. It's almost like a planned, you bring the people into town and they like the town, they stay in the town, they expand a bit, they get a condo or family.
Plus, like I did say, we.
I like that
We
plan.
effectively reduced the density by basically 20% by taking that density bonus out, so that was something. You know, anyway. What we already did.
I'll talk about the elephant in the room. I just saw everybody's whites of their eyes all light up when someone said 750 apartments. 715, okay. And that is going back behind Panera Bread, replaced the old
Outlets.
Well,
outlets
Not
somewhat.
quite there, but.
Biden's is going behind.
I'm just giving everyone conceptually, they're probably all hearing that for the first time, going, what? You know, so that is an application that is in, correct?
Yes.
Correct?
Is it approved?
No.
There you go. That's, so you can,
But
any more whites of the eyes out there? No, okay, we're
Yes.
good.
form-based code,
We all want like this.
Code, yes.
that's not.
And it's compliant.
As long as they comply.
Yeah,
It's, the other thing is, I believe there's also, it's not just apartments, it's also
Yeah,
commercial.
I got it. It's, you know,
The apartments are all on the outside from the.
it's not on Route 9. I'm in for it, you know. I'm not gonna fight that one.
So, yeah, the other aspects of the form-based code, like the things about the roads, are, it's trying to create a pedestrian safe, you know, like curbing, as much as Roger doesn't like curbing. It's actually considered,
radiuses.
it's actually considered a pedestrian safety feature, curbs.
Well, and know too that when we do the streets and the form-based code, we have a whole section on them, different types and different streetscapes. But also, we work closely with the town designated engineer to make sure that those streets comply with what they need to comply with, including fire code and being built. So even though they might not have an 80-foot right-of-way that we have in other parts of town, all of the other pieces that are important and essential to being able to carry people and trucks and traffic safely are there, and we do it in conjunction with the engineer. So it's not just, you know, willy-nilly, so to say.
I would say that the form-based code is, you know, it was a plan that was the first in the state, and they followed through on it. I mean, I must say, it's a damn good plan. You know, you start, even though Rogers questioned me, you start at the front and you go to the back. If you can get through that whole notebook, you got your application. It's clear, it's concise, and that was the intent of it, is because before then, they'd bring these PDDs, they'd linger, they'd stall, and it was years and years and years. And the developers and the business people in town came back to the town and say, your process is too costly and it takes too long. So they implemented that and it worked. I mean, I'm not 100% agreeable to it. For example, density, if I had my choice, I would change that. But overall, it worked. And even you said it's successful. It did what they intended. Don't screw with it. My feeling.
In RD2, that's part of form-based code.
Yes.
Is there a distance between houses? Want to build houses on RD2, is there designated distance between the two houses?
Yeah.
Well, there's
Yeah,
setbacks.
there's setbacks. They do
very
a min-max. You have
specific.
to go to the RD2 building type, look for single detached home, go through all of that.
Do you by any chance know what it is?
No, but if I had to guess, it's probably 5 and 10.
5 and 10 feet?
Minimum of 5, max of 10, but I don't know that for a single detached. You might be able to do a cottage court there, which might be a little bit different. I don't know.
So to clarify, if someone builds a house next to an existing house in RD2, it's going to be between 5 and 10 feet.
Well, it's
Off
from
it.
the property
it's-
line. It's property line. It's always property line. So it's no different than the setbacks anywhere else in town for that property line to the building.
But it's only in that
But
area.
again, like I said, I have to look. I don't know. Form-based code's got many pieces to the puzzle that you have to, do. I mean,
And
you're
there's-
welcome to come in and
There's one
and we
expert.
can talk about it,
If somebody's not comfortable, I highly advise going into planning, go through each page, and by the time you finish, you might not agree with everything in there, but it's very clear, and you will understand it by the time you
Sleep.
head at the end.
Did people's zoning change when the town approved form-based code?
What was that?
Did,
Yeah. But most of it's right here. It's business.
What was
if you had
it?
a house on Dunning Street,
question?
if you had a house on Dunning Street,
code was instituted.
if you had a house on Dunning Street, and then the town establishes form-based code, did that zoning change for that residential homeowner on Dunning Street?
Yeah.
After it was created,
Right.
but they'd be exempt from
It'd
that.
be grandfathered in instead of ripping down his house.
So they should be grandfathered in
There.
to what the previous zoning was.
Unless they take the structure down.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know exactly what you're driving at, but yes, the zoning changed. There's an open space strip out in front of there for the parade ground part that was there previously, and then you have, and again, like without the map and the book in front of me, I'm not really sure exactly where we're talking, but yes, the zoning
A
did
residential,
change.
a residential homeowner who's been here for decades
Yep,
is now in form-based code,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody wants to develop right next to that house, and now, according to form-based code, that offset off of this person's property line is between 5 to 10 feet. Whereas before, it probably would have been greater.
Maybe.
yeah, it might have. I mean, generally, in other parts of town, you're looking at 10, 15, usually for side and rear, sometimes 20. So it all
So-
depends, again, like I said. Right.
So I'm concerned is, did form-based code negatively affect this long-term resident of our town?
I mean,
Sounds like my house when they were developing in back there.
I mean, there's not
Under
that,
the
there's not that
form-based
many
code.
of them. There's the two
There's very
houses.
few. Yeah.
There's the two houses that now are circled around the Dunning Street development, the log cabin and the little blue
Log
house.
home is probably in
There's the two historic homes on the other side of the street. Is there two?
there At the corner.
There's definitely one, I don't know. if
Right.
So again,
one is.
But it doesn't go beyond that.
do we need to look at form-based, are there some things in form-based code we need to look at? And that was the open question I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't think so. We haven't, it's not like there's hundreds of homes that have been affected by form-based code.
Very few.
We're not asking anyone to conform. Like I said, Matt says, plot, okay, form-based code come in, and therefore it's form-based code except for what was here, and the continued form-based code. We're not asking this guy to conform and reconfigure his driveway.
Right, and if he's continuously using the house for whatever it was, home-based occupation, whatever was allowed prior to, it can continue on in
Yeah.
that manner. And I understand
Yeah.
to some degree what you're saying, if the lot next door got redeveloped and now it fell underneath this other zone, whether it's RD2 or whatever it is, did the setbacks change? I would say yes, they probably did, because we're trying to get more density, right? I mean, that's the form-based code, you're trying to get it downtown. But I don't know that without really looking into it, I can't really say off the cuff.
Plus the other thing in the form-based code, it's a defined area
Right.
that's allowed.
Right.
Isn't going anywhere else. It's there. That's the density at this time.
And the purpose is to save density, is to save open space in other areas.
Exactly.
Right.
You get the best two worlds.
Right. Well, it's now 5:35. We have a whole nother meeting after this, so if there's nothing else right now,
Buying
we'll
pizza?
we'll adjourn this and not buying pizza tonight. I have in the past.
Thank you.
We didn't talk about it tonight, but thanks, everybody, for coming out. Okay, I guess Mike wants to make a quick comment. We're kind of breaking up. Make it quick.